Hello everyone, and welcome to the Yakutumbism podcast. Today we're going to be discussing recent developments regarding the war in Minembwe, and we might also get into a few updates regarding recent events that occurred in Lubumbashi with regards to Bakata Katanga. So the first topic we're going to be discussing is regarding General Ebuela Mtetezi, who, if you don't know, he is the main Mai commander on the ground, commanding forces who are confronting the Ngumino and Twirwaneho terrorist groups. So he's basically the main CNPSC, CNPSC being the coalition of Mai groups headed by General Yakutumba to oppose Rwandan imperialism in the region and to oppose bad governance. So he's pretty much the main CNPSC commander on the ground fighting against these terrorists that hope to break up the country. Now, essentially, these militias, they claimed that they had killed him in battle. They claimed that during recent clashes, that they had killed him. So this happened about a week ago. I'm not sure the exact date, but it was before February 9th. They were claiming that they had actually killed him in combat. And actually on February 9th, a video was posted to the La Voix du Kivu YouTube channel, which I recommend as a source for anything regarding the war in South Kivu, the war against the balkanization of the DRC. They have a lot of great on-the-ground footage. They even have a few videos in English as well, so for international audiences who don't necessarily speak French or Swahili. So they have a lot of good footage of the Mai in combat. They have a lot of good on-the-ground stuff because they have reporters in bed with General Mtetezi's Mai group. And so essentially this video that they uploaded was pretty much of the general himself just denying the rumors that he had been killed. Basically it's just a portrait shot video of him talking about the fact that he is still alive, and also basically just talking about the war and the situation on the ground. So yeah, once again, the propaganda that's espoused by these militias once again has proven to be false. And as I've established in the last podcast, you can't trust these people. They'll make up any lie to make themselves feel better. You know, the significance of General Mtetezi dying is immense for the cause of the Rwandans in this case, because considering he is the main commander that is directly combating these militias, if he were to be killed, that would be a major blow to the Mai. And so by claiming that he had been killed, it provides a morale boost to their own troops, their own people, and it provides demoralization towards the side of the Congolese people, towards the side of the Mai. Because a rumor, even if it's not true, can still be powerful. It can still affect morale. Because if people believe that some great leader or someone who's protecting them is now dead, they're not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel as empowered as they might have. So I think it's good that the rumor was cleared up quick. So for closing thoughts on that, pretty much the general is still alive. He's still on the ground fighting, and don't listen to Rwandan propaganda. So for our next topic, this comes from the war in Minembwe again, the war between the Mai and the Ngumino, Twirwaneho, and their local and foreign allies. So essentially, the logistics officer of the Ngumino, logistics is a pretty short way to put it. He's in charge of a lot of things, according to sources. But logistics was his main thing, sort of like gathering supplies for the group. I think, according to L'Opération de l'Autodéfense Mai on Facebook, he was in charge of logistics, cooperation, and supplies. So, I mean, supplies kind of goes hand in hand with logistics, but essentially he was the sort of diplomatic officer of the group, as well as the dude in charge of securing supplies for the militia, securing arms, ammunition, etc. Now, he was arrested by the Congolese army, the FARDC, as he was trying to fly out of the country. So he was at Minembwe Airport, I believe, and the FARDC arrested him, and his intended destination was Rwanda. Now, the idea that Rwanda has been providing support to these militias because they further the cause of balkanization, it's not a new thing, right? We've suspected this for a long time and time again, we've been proven right. This is just another example of the evidence that Rwanda is supporting these groups being proven right again. Because, for one, the Banyamulenge claim they have no ancestors in Rwanda. They claim that they're not even related to the Rwandans and the Rwandan Tutsis in Rwanda, etc. So if that's the case, then I don't see any possible reason for this guy to be flying to Rwanda to see family members. For a militia leader, not even a militia leader, for an officer in a militia, it's very uncommon to see them taking a vacation out of the country, let alone a vacation to Rwanda. According to some people, the Rwandan government opposes the Ngumino and Twirwaneho, these Banyamulenge militias, according to some people who are, of course, inaccurate. So if that was the case, he would not be welcome in Rwanda. So why was he trying to fly there? Now, I think it's pretty obvious. If you were listening before, I said he was the logistics officer of the group, the guy in charge of getting supplies, the guy in charge of getting ammunition, weapons, the guy in charge of pretty much making the Ngumino a fighting force. Now, as we mentioned previously, the Ngumino is pretty much confirmed to be supported by the Rwandan government. There's a lot of evidence that points towards that fact. Now, if the logistics officer of an armed group accused of being backed by the Rwandan government, the guy in charge of securing supplies for the militia, is caught trying to fly to Rwanda, what do you think he's doing? It was alleged in the My post on Facebook that he was going to meet with the Rwandan government to secure more supplies for his militia, or to sort of work up a new strategy. So that's pretty much the only reason I can see him for going to Rwanda. Because, like I said, if all these claims about the Banyamulenge are true, all these things, then he would have no family in Rwanda. He would have no reason to go to Rwanda for family. If he's a militia leader, he can't go on he's not going to go on a vacation. Or not a militia leader, he's an officer, once again. But yeah, if he's an officer in a militia, he's not going to go on a vacation. It's just dumb, especially during a hot flashpoint of the conflict in Minembwe. You'd expect him to be going on official business only. And also, if we're to believe the narrative that the Rwandan government despises the Ngumino, despises the Twirwaneho, then he wouldn't be welcome in the country. So he would have no purpose going to Rwanda other than what I said before, either securing additional aid or basically requesting assistance in changing their sort of strategy, because their strategy hasn't worked thus far because they've been stopped by the Mai Mai. So this information was actually confirmed by the FARDC. It wasn't just a random Facebook post that alleges something and nobody else follows up on it. The FARDC's spokesperson for the Sokola 2 operation, which is the military operation against armed groups in South Kivu, the FARDC's security operation in that region, he pretty much said that, yeah, we arrested an officer of the Ngumino. I believe his name is Dudon Kasereka. I think that's the name. but that's the FARDC spokesman for the operation. So he confirmed this. And for the FARDC, this is a very, very rare thing I'm going to applaud them on. I'm not the biggest FARDC fan. I mean, obviously, not everyone in the FARDC is a bad person. Not everyone joins the FARDC because they want to serve the Kabilist regime or whatever. But the thing is, the FARDC, it's an undeniable fact that the FARDC is infiltrated with Kabilists. It's infiltrated with Rwandans, people still loyal to the Rwandan government. Literal officers in the FARDC used to fight with the RCD, used to fight with Laurent Nkunda, used to fight with M23. Things like that. It's not a secret that the Congolese military is infiltrated by these elements. So it's kind of rare to see the FARDC actually doing something favorable to the population, because the FARDC is pretty much known for pretty much not being effective, not being able to carry out its jobs. Some units are known to cooperate with hostile armed groups, as we've seen in North Kivu with regards to the NDC Renove. So this is honestly a really good thing to see from the FARDC. It's a rare thing to see, but I'm very, very proud of the FARDC for actually taking the initiative to defend the country, to actually do their job, defend the country from invaders, defend the country from people who want to kill Congolese citizens, from people who want to destroy the country. It's good to see that they made this arrest, because if they didn't, who would have known? You know, he could have arrived in Rwanda. He could have secured a new shipment of weapons, might have secured volunteers, whatever. We have no idea what he could have done in Rwanda. So it's good to see that the FARDC is actually taking action against these groups and not just sitting there and watching, as they have been for months on end. And for our next topic, this is a little bit of a short one, sort of a morale booster. Sort of something to, make you proud, make you renew your faith in the Mai Mai, things like that. If you're kind of unsatisfied with the progress that you've been seeing in the war in Minembwe, this will kind of make you a little bit more satisfied. So essentially, it's been reported that 6 Tutsi rebels from the Ngumino and Twirwaneho, they went to the joint FARDC MONUSCO sort of base in the Minembwe, South Kivu, that sort of area, the area around Minembwe, the Itambwe highlands, the plains of Fizi, etc. Those areas, their main sort of base there, and they pretty much confessed that they weren't Banyamulenge from South Kivu, they were Tutsis from North Kivu. Banyamulenge, of course, being the term for Tutsis in South Kivu. I would prefer not to use that term, because it implies that, they're from the town of Mulenge, but they're actually from Rwanda. But it's the most common term for these people, so that is the term I'm going to use. We can get into Banyamulenge theory and how the name is false another time. But basically, they confessed that they were from North Kivu, and they wanted to surrender and return to their homes because they were afraid of being killed by the Mai Mai. They were afraid that they were losing the war. So, despite what it might seem like, despite the fact that the war in Minembwe, it might seem like it's at a stalemate, or it might seem like the odds are overwhelmingly against the Mai Mai. Just remember this small fact, the fact that 6 rebels from these groups wanted to be returned to their residence areas in North Kivu. They wanted to surrender because they were afraid of being killed by the Mai Mai, because they were afraid of the Mai Mai. Even if the odds are stacked against the Mai Mai, they're still going to fight because they're true patriots of the country. And with this story, it kind of just goes to show that there's that behind the facade, the Ngumino, the Twirwaneho, and their allies are not achieving their goals. They're not being successful. They're losing the war, and that's a good sign. So if you ever lost faith in the Mai Mai, if you've ever sort of seen the progress in the war in Minembwe, and you're starting to doubt what's going on, you're starting to doubt that the Mai Mai will actually be able to succeed in this war, just remember the Mai Mai's own enemies are afraid that they're going to be killed. They're afraid that they're losing the war. And the Mai Mai will fight until the end. They'll fight until the country is in flames, essentially. They will not stop. They will not stop the fight to protect the country until the country ceases to exist, essentially. And now for our last topic, we're going to get into the recent incursion made by the Bakata Katanga separatist militia in Lubumbashi, that sort of area. So essentially, I'll just give a little background. Bakata Katanga is a sort of continuation of Katangi's separatist movements that originated in the 1960s that were supported by foreign powers. So they're like the latest generation of it. They have no actual connection to a lot of these former separatists because, as we know, that was in the 60s. A lot of these former separatists are either dead, live in Angola, or have pretty much given up their separatist ideas. It's been a long time since the 60s, obviously. And this new generation of Katangan separatists have no actual connection, familial connection, whatever, to the old Katangan separatists of the 60s. They sort of this Bakata Katanga movement sort of sprung up using that sort of same sentiment, but in a new sort of movement that was founded by Gideon Kingu Matonga, who's a war criminal. He was in prison. He was on trial. He was going to be on trial, and he got broken out in 2011. Started the separatist movement, displaced hundreds of thousands, killed thousands, burned tons of villages. Horrible atrocities we saw throughout Katanga as a result of his insurgency. And then he kind of gave up arms. I believe it was in 2016. I'm going to verify that. He pretty much surrendered to the Congolese authorities and said that he was going to start a political party. Yeah, it was in 11th of October 2016. Basically in an effort to end insecurity. And as we've seen recently, Mutunga has disappeared. The attacks by his militia resurfaced in late 2019 and continued sporadically throughout 2020, and have obviously continued into this year. Now, the thing with this militia is it's basically become increasingly Kabilist. So, Jean Numbi, who's a well-known Kabilist officer, he is known to support them. There's a bunch of FARDC officers in the region who are Kabila loyalists, who support this militia. So it's not even super in favor of separatism anymore. I mean, they still espouse that separatist ideology, but the main idea is Kabilism. So what happened? Basically on March 14th, a day after the arrest of that Ngumino logistics officer, the Mai Mai attacked a military base north of Lubumbashi. They seized a lot of weapons. I think around 16 people were killed in the fighting. I don't know how many of that were members of the separatist militia and members of the army, but around 16 people were killed and a bunch of weapons were seized. So obviously this is a major development because usually when we see Bakata Katanga attacks, at least as of recently, they usually just target Lubumbashi, and they're not even like targeting military anything. They just kind of walk into the city, shoot it up, and then leave. Or they're confronted by police, and a lot of them die. That's the thing. It's never like there's never a true military objective when it comes to their major attacks. With this, it seemed like they actually had a plan. They actually wanted to strike at the FARDC, and they actually wanted to get ammunition, which is a interesting change in tactics from what we've seen from the group before. They also released a statement on Facebook, which I'm going to pull up real quick, essentially talking about the attack on the military base in Lubumbashi. So the statement is pretty long. There is a Bakata Katanga Facebook. If you basically look up Kata Katanga, so Kata space Katanga, you could probably find it. But basically they released a statement essentially denying that they had any involvement in the attack. It basically said, turmoil and demands among the troops in the city, the troops of the commandos and of the Republican Guard are at the base of this situation. The soldiers claim several months of unpaid wages. Since the arrival of Felix Tshisekedi as the head of state, the tribalization of the army and the discrimination of certain troops would be the basis of discontent and desertions within the army. The squealing bullets this Sunday in Lubumbashi are the work of the soldiers themselves who are unhappy with several months of unpaid wages. This is not the work of Bakata Katanga. The images of massacres circulating in social networks are the old images to deceive the vigilance. It goes on. But basically, essentially, they deny having any involvement with this attack at all, which obviously we know is complete BS. Sure, a bunch of soldiers shot up their own military base and killed each other. We're totally going to believe that. We're totally going to believe these people who are literally only known because of their atrocities that they commit. They're only known because they're brutal and violent. We're totally going to trust these people, right? Totally. They also go on to defend John Numbi, who's the known Kabilist, who's the known supporter of Bakata Katanga. And then they also state that he's not involved with Bakata Katanga, which is kind of odd given that they defend him the sentence before, and then they just go back to saying, oh yeah, he's not involved with us, but we're going to defend him. He's a worthy son of Katanga, as it says in their post, but he's not involved with us at all. We big fan of the guy, but he's not involved with us. Yeah, totally makes complete sense that a militia, a militant organization, is going to go out of their way to defend a military general who has no connection with them. That's total BS. Obviously, nothing in this statement really can be trusted because, for one, it's coming from these Bakata Katanga people, and as we've established, they're brutal, they're liars, and all that. So yeah, that's pretty much all from that topic. Essentially, Bakata Katanga are just another group of balkanizing liars that really shouldn't have a voice at all. They shouldn't have anyone who listens to them. The only reason to listen to Bakata Katanga is for comedy, for comedic purposes. You read their posts to laugh at their stupidity, to laugh at their warped view of the world. You don't actually read it because you actually support what they're going for. Because even they don't know what they're going for, and that's the thing. So yeah, this has been the Yakutumbism podcast. If you enjoyed, I'm coming out with these episodes more often. So if you enjoyed, be sure to look out for the next one. And this information, pretty much everything I've stated in this podcast, is accurate as of the 16th of February, 2021. I'm going to start doing this on the podcasts because a lot of what I talk about is current events. So I don't necessarily want to have someone listen to it a week later, a month later, a year later, and think it's up-to-date, relevant information. I mean, it still might be. Some of the stuff I talk about is relevant for a while, but a lot of what I talk about is updates and recent happenings. So I don't want to give the impression to a new listener that might listen months on that what is happening then is happening now and whatever future time they find that. So yeah, this has been the Yakutumbism podcast. Signing off.